And we're ready when you are.
Give a couple more minutes. We're missing two people.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Sean. Hey, Linda. Hi, David.
Okay, it is 7 o'clock and everybody is present. We can go ahead and start. Hereby call to order this Board of Education meeting for Ridgefield for Tuesday, March 29th. And we can start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone can take themselves off of mute and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of
of
the
the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we will start tonight with the first of two potential public comment sections, starting now with up to 10 speakers or 30 minutes. Rachel, who do we have?
Yes. So good evening. Just as a kind reminder, you will have 3 minutes for public comment. Please state your name and address before going forward. First person is Christine.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So, thank you so much for your time. I am commenting about the full-time choral director position. I don't know. I'm new to Ridgefield, and I honestly don't know the particulars of the situation, but I have a young daughter at Ridgeberry Elementary, and I'm a music educator myself, and my husband and I moved to Ridgefield for the music program, and I'm a professional singer and choral director, and I guess I have a question that hopefully will be answered as to whether or not this position will be filled in the fall. And I just wanted to state that it's part of why we're here, and the arts are utterly essential to a high schooler's experience. I wanted to state support for filling that position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next public comment is Claire.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Claire. I have a daughter, Kira, who's in the high school choir program. So we actually have firsthand experience of what an amazing program it is. So my daughter was obviously quite shocked to hear the news that potentially the choir program would be ending. So we're relieved to hear that that is not the case. However, we are quite concerned about exactly what is happening with the program. So it would be, I'd appreciate it very much if we could get some sort of clarity on what is happening regarding Mr. Haynes and his future with the program. He's an amazing choir teacher, and it would be a real shame to see him go. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment, Jacob.
Hello, my name is Jacob Rodebeck, and I'm also here to speak about the high school music choral program and what's going on with that. I myself am a high school choral teacher as well, And I just would like to say that the pandemic has been difficult for all music programs, and it's important that that music programs are given the opportunity to build back from the challenges faced during the pandemic. Now that masks are off and students are beginning to be able to sing fully again, not have to space and all of that, it's making an enormous difference in the morale and the sense of performing music. And I'm just simply concerned that with the changeover in this program and what's happening here is that it's going to further alienate students and students that are interested in singing and love singing, and that it will hinder the growth of the program and its return from the challenges faced during the past 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment is Bob.
Bob, you can go ahead.
Bob, we can't hear you. Maybe are you on mute? I don't see that you are. Okay, maybe we can come back to Bob. He's probably experiencing some technical difficulties. All right. So Bob, we will come back to you if you could hear me. Okay. And that is it for now, Jonathan.
Great. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Okay, Chairman's report tonight, just a few items. First off, tonight we do have a very policy-heavy meeting. Sorry, Rachel. But before we get into the policies, we do have two presentations on program recommendations for both phonics and mathematics to go through first. Updating on the budget calendar, thanks to everybody who was able to make it to last night's public hearing. Budget is not on the agenda for us tonight. However, tomorrow night we'll be meeting with the Board of Finance to go over their questions around our budget. And following after that, the Board of Finance, while they will not be voting on our budget tomorrow night, we do expect them to be doing that sometime next week. We do have a board meeting on Monday night of next week. So if there is a Board of Finance budget vote that for whatever reason does not put forward the 4.79 that we have adopted, we may need to call a special meeting later next week before spring break to discuss any adjustments that need to be made at that time. Hopefully that won't come to it, but if it is, just a heads up. One more thing, this week on Thursday at 10:30, CABE is holding a webinar to update on bills that have been voted out of the Education Committee. That could be very interesting for some of us, and Liz, hopefully you'll be able to make it and give us an update on that at the next legislative update. And that's all for me. Dr. De Silva.
I am planning to, Jonathan. It's on my calendar, so.
Thanks, Liz.
Hi, everyone, and good evening again. Jonathan, you talked about a few of my points. We will have an April 4th meeting, so it is different than what most folks expect. That is actually going to be an in-person meeting at the new Board of Ed offices on 90 East Ridge. I will ask in advance for lots of patience with the technology. It will be an ish scenario without a doubt. But the reality is if we don't do it now, we actually won't be able to get in anytime soon. So we ask for your patience. It's not perfect, but we'll be together and hopefully we can make that work. So April 4th, in person, Board of Education offices, 90 East Ridge Road. As Jonathan mentioned, we had a Board of Finance meeting yesterday where we presented the Board of Education budget. The public had an opportunity to speak, and I think that that was a meaningful opportunity for all of us. We had a Distinguished Principal Award. Principal Salem today was announced as the American Association of School Librarians Distinguished Principal, which is a great recognition. He'll be celebrated at some point, I believe, this fall. So congratulations to Principal Salem. Portugal did make it to the World Cup in Qatar, if anyone cares about that, but I think my family really did. And let me just take a moment to talk about the choral program, because obviously we had some folks that care deeply about the music program, as do we. So I want to be very, very clear. We do not have any planned cuts for the music program at RHS for next year. As we all know, the high school is based on registrations, right? That's how we create our classes. We did have a resignation in February, and that was before enrollment. That said, we do not plan on making any cuts. So any language around layoffs, which isn't even something we use in education, we use something called RIF, reduction of force. We are not in that place. So I want to be really clear. So families, kids that are worried about that, we've spoken to our students, but if you're worried, please don't be. As of now, we have the enrollment and we will be having our programming just as it is this year. And I think that is it for me tonight. I'm excited to hear from our team around actually 3 curriculum items: technology, phonics, and mathematics. And I know everybody's really worked hard and we're proud to have them here this evening. And we do have Dave Fiorillo, who's on screen. For those of you that are meeting him for the first time, he's actually filling in between the break of Dawn Norton and Jill Brown, who will be joining us later this spring. So you'll be hearing from him momentarily as well.
Thank you, Dr. Da Silva. Next up, committee chair reports. Who wants to? Ken, your hand was up fast.
Well, because I'm just Dr. Da Silva stole all my thunder, because we did have a finance committee meeting where Dave did present the financials, and I believe he will be doing so again tonight. So the full board gets that same presentation.
Thanks, Ken. Other committee chairs, Rachel?
So good evening again. The policy committee met on 3/21. We had a very productive meeting, and we have 7 policies coming before the full board for first read later on.
Thank you, Rachel. Tina.
So I'm going to divide. RC CASA met. I couldn't make the meeting because I wasn't well, but the group talked about the rising, mental health crisis and what we can do with partnering with our neighboring towns. Also, very quickly, for any parent who's missed this, the parent circles are back. I think the PTA has been sharing information, but just wanted to give out a shout to the larger community. The Energy Task Force, they talked about how to possibly add zero emission vehicles to the fleet in town. They're still working on requesting ARPA funds for HVAC units that do include 2 RPS buildings. And lastly, the Strategic Planning Committee met. We did discuss the capacity study that was done in 2017, 2018. And the reason we did that is so that the new board member and the community at large could understand how we got to the feeder pattern, the 50-50 split for both the middle schools. We had both the middle school principals there. The committee plans to meet soon to see what impacts, as in how many students, how many families it may impact if we try to balance out the capacity at both the middle schools by possibly a pocket redistricting. We're just talking, this is still being discussed. So if anybody's hearing, please don't get upset. We're still discussing, but we do understand the limitations at Scott's Ridge. So we hope to meet soon. And that was it, I think.
Thank you, Tina.
Yeah.
Any other liaison reports for tonight? Sean.
Prevention Council meeting a couple of weeks ago. March finishes up Gambling Awareness Month, and April starts Alcohol Awareness Month. It's a different topic every month, obviously. And we're working on things for the graduation party and some pizza box stickers with some of the pizza joints in town that you may see when you get delivery.
Great, thank you, Sean. Anyone else with liaison reports? No, okay, we can move on. First up, we have approval of minutes, starting with the February 14th meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of February 14th, 2022.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Okay, thank you. Any comments or amendments to be made to these minutes? No, there being none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Well, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And moving on to the February 28th minutes, do we have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the special meeting on February 28th, 2022.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second on that? Ken, thank you. Any adjustments or amendments to be made on these minutes? Anyone? There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hands. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Thank you. The motion carries 8-0 with one abstention. And now we can move on to the financial report and transfers for February 28th, 2022.
Okay,
Start with the motion and then we'll do discussion.
I move that the Board of Education accept the financial report ending February 28th, 2022.
Thank you. Second for that? And again, thank you. So who is taking us through the financials?
David Fiorillo here from Twin Lakes Consulting will do just that.
Thank you, David.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to be here. I have had good fortune of working with Dr. De Silva over the last few weeks. A little bit of background about myself. I am a certified school business official in Connecticut. I've also been sitting on the School Business Official Board of Directors for the last 4 years. So I've worked with a number of districts, and my role is really to come in exactly like a moment like this and essentially fill the gap between an outgoing business official and an incoming one. I happen to know Jill Brown personally, and she is very strong, so you're in good hands coming in. But there is a gap in the contract, so I bring myself, and I make sure that things are moving smoothly. First impressions is you have a fantastic district here, very well organized back office and some really good folks. Had an opportunity to go over your February financials. As of February 28th, the district has expended and obligated $99.452 million of the adopted $260,000 adopted budget. That represents about 97.25% of the appropriation. I'm going to go through a little narrative about some subcategories just to bring the board up to speed. But the overall impression is you're in very good shape, and this is very normal for this time of the year. So as you're probably aware, the majority of schools' budgets are made up of personnel. In this case, it's 59% of your budget is salaries and 15% is benefits. So that's nearly 75%. Both of those are on budget and within the expected ranges. So that is a very good thing because that is a big portion of your budget. You also have other benefits, which is also tracking on budget, FICA and Medicare. And both of those are within budget at this point. FICA and Medicare are not encumbered until we actually use them. So you won't see that reflected on your report. If you're not aware already, the pandemic has left us with some challenges in certain areas. Special education is one of those. And you are seeing some increased costs in special education, which has put you over budget in this particular category. I do not believe this will be pervasive in your overall adopted budget, but it should be noted. We do receive some funding from the state to offset costs in special education, but you have a very, very strong special education director, and I know she is on top of all of this right now. So a lot of confidence with that going forward. Transportation is also on budget, but it should be noted within the transportation area. As we all are seeing the price pain at the pumps, the cost of oil is going up. That does not impact our overall transportation contract that we have for our buses, but we do have a lot of smaller contracts with third-party providers that may transport students to special education programs or other schools, and we are seeing some impacts there, some mid-year rate adjustments. Again, don't believe this will be impactful on the overall budget, but just worth noting. Also, we are looking at locking in electricity for next year. Currently, you have a contract that runs through November of 22. And I know Joe is working very closely with at least one energy broker, and will come back at some point in the future with some proposed rates for review and approval. So the long and the short is February is actually a very good month for a transition in the business office because you're not close to the year end and you're not close to the year beginning. It's actually a kind of a good time to do this. So nothing jumps out at me here other than things that could positively impact the budget. If we had outplaced students that return to district, or lower short-term or long-term disability claims, or some unpaid leaves of absences, those always go into favor of the district. Other things that just worth watching going forward, legal expenses, those can be very low and then be very high depending on what comes forward. We're obviously watching fuel oil usage and prices, as well as electricity. Those have been very volatile in the last few months. Substitute teacher expenses, paras, custodians, being able to fill those positions is hard right now, but we are very, very cognizant of those expenses as we move forward. On page 14 of the budget packet is a breakdown, which is, I followed the same format your former business manager used. So you can see line item detail. I'm not going to go through each line. We did that at committee, but it's essentially reflective of what we just spoke about. And then finally, this district does bring forward all transfers, and I just thought it would be worth noting. Again, these are fairly inconsequential because there's very, very small dollar amounts for the size of a district budget, but it's worth mentioning. There has been some funds that were reallocated from some fall sports to other areas, and that's just because of canceled sub-varsity games not played due to COVID. We'll cover some spring rev track fees and some transportation also for some fall lines because of some canceled sub-varsity games in the girls volleyball area would be covered, transferred to cover that health and security for some additional police presence in winter basketball games because of some limited seating capacity due to COVID. I believe spring sports are more traditional this year, and that's a very good thing. So I will stop now and open up for any questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the financial report first? Because we have a motion on the table for the financial report before we move to transfers. Any questions on the financials? Being none, all those in favor of approving the financials ending February 28th, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And now for the transfers, do I have a motion? Or is there anything to be motioned on the transfers? Nothing reaches the threshold. Any questions on the transfers? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Jonathan?
Yes, Ken.
I just wanted to give a just recognition to Dave for just jumping right into the role, and it was like he'd been doing it this whole time. It was really a really good committee meeting that we had. So I wanted to just thank him for that.
Great. It sounded like that tonight as well. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Now moving on, the next item up is a possible recommendation for the 2022-23 phonics program. Who's going to be taking us through this?
Well, the team will, but I'll really turn it over to Corey. But before, I'll just actually, Corey, if it's okay with you, I'll say my words now for both the phonics and the math program. In the 2 years that I've been here, no one's going to talk about an anniversary, but it's coming soon, like in 2 days. 2 days. So, and I'll be like Corey and buy myself cupcakes. on my anniversary. But nonetheless, what I've heard from families and really from faculty and from the board is that we really needed to take a deep look, in particular at what we were doing in our primary grades around scientifically research-based programs. And I also heard the great need that we had in the area of mathematics, really not just in the elementary school, but across the continuum. And I'm really, really proud, K-12 really, of the work that's already begun, algebra, geometry, professional learning in the middle school with a new program that began just before I got here. But certainly I think tonight just marks the real thoughtfulness of a team that partnered with teachers, which is the most important, school leaders, obviously, but really being thoughtful about the process, not just rushing to make a decision, thinking it through. And it really marks a great day, in my opinion, that now we have a recommendation. Hopefully the Board of Finance is listening and supports our budget so that we can push these two pieces along for implementation next year. So I'll turn it over to Corey.
Great. So good evening. And yes, tonight is a very exciting night. A little more than a year ago, when I got here, we pretty quickly started the collaborative action team for phonics. And so you got to hear all about CATS. And the second that Linda Johnson became elementary director, I quickly turned it over to her because I know there's no one better to lead a process like this than Linda Johnson. So tonight we are going to share with you recommendations for curriculum resources for both phonics at the elementary level and mathematics. And we're going to begin with phonics. So I do want to take a moment to thank all of the teachers that participated. It was very important to the community, to our administrators, and to our teachers that we had a representative group from all the buildings, special education, we had administrators working together to study two resources over the course of an entire year. So tonight we're going to take you through that. We have with us Linda Johnson, the elementary director, and Ellen Tuckner, who was the building representative for this process. So I'm just going to give them a second to introduce themselves, and then we can begin.
Good evening, everyone. It's Linda Johnson, Director of Elementary Education. Thank you for having us here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Ellen Tuckner, Principal at Veterans Park School, and thank you for allowing us to be here with you tonight.
So let's begin. Next slide. So this presentation, we're going to share with you the recommendation that the Collaborative Action Team, the CAT, came up with for adopting and implementing a research-based phonics curriculum resource. And we want to reiterate before I turn it over to Linda and then to Ellen, that a curriculum resource is different from a curriculum. The curriculum, like we've talked about, is a roadmap. The curriculum is not changing, but the curriculum resource is the resource that supports teachers in their day-to-day implementation of that curriculum. We know our teachers are, we know that it's not just about a resource that brings all of this learning to life. It's really our fabulous teachers, but having a really strong, aligned resource across all of the schools is what we're so excited to hear the recommendation about for tonight. So Linda Johnson, I'm turning it over to you. Next slide.
Great. Thank you, Corey. Okay, so yes, this evening, Ellen and I will briefly update you on the process that has been in place for just about a year now in terms of selecting a new curriculum resource for teaching and learning phonics in PK through grade 2. As you may remember, and for the benefit of the members who are new to the board, last spring we did establish that collaborative action team that Corey just mentioned. And we had a great representation of teachers, general education and special education teachers, along with administrators, pre-K, preschool through second grade. And the goal of our work that you see here on this slide was to take a look at two resources, Fundations and Phonics First, that are based upon scientifically research-based practices for teaching and learning phonics instruction. And that phonics instruction includes decoding, reading, and then encoding, spelling. So the two resources, as I mentioned, that we studied were Fundations and Phonics First. And the team purposely chose these two resources because we knew from the beginning, from the get-go, that they did follow the Orton-Gillingham instructional approach. That is a direct, explicit, multisensory, structured way to teaching literacy. And before I go on to describe the different components of the process, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the members of our CAT, of our collaborative action team. Thank them for their dedicated, thoughtful work to the process. Their work is truly, truly appreciated and representative of the commitment of all of our teachers and administrators here in Ridgefield. So a huge thank you to all of the members of the collaborative action team. And next slide. So next I'll talk a little bit about the process that the team experienced that you see here, these three main parts. And last spring, you may remember that the team began by participating in overview workshops with staff developers from both companies, during which they learned about the core components of the resources. This year, we were able to get our hands on some sample materials so that teachers could explore student and teacher materials that they learned about during the overview presentations. And then, given all the constraints and challenges of COVID, we were able to pull off our site visits remotely with Chappaqua and Darien. And for that, we were very, very grateful. The team had an opportunity to watch a Phonics First and a Fundations lesson at each grade level. After the lessons, the teachers, the whole team, experienced at each grade level, they had an opportunity to talk with the teachers, ask them questions, gain insights about their experiences with adopting and implementing the resources. And our teachers found that to be incredibly valuable, to see a lesson in action with students and then have time to talk with colleagues who are actually using the materials. And then throughout the process, we did collect feedback using a common lens. And as the team reviewed materials, participated in site visits, and participated in team discussions, they would refer back to the common criteria, the common lenses that we established. And now I'll turn it over to Mrs. Tuckner, who will share the team's recommendation. Next
Thank you,
slide.
Linda. Next slide. Thank you, Linda. So as a result of the process that Linda just described to you, the team has chosen the program Fundations as the fit for phonics instruction in Ridgefield Public Schools. It is our recommendation that we implement Fundations pre-K through grade 2 as the means to provide phonics instruction for all of our elementary schools. As Linda mentioned earlier, both programs had fit the criteria that we had set forth. Most importantly, that they were research-based, that they were systematic and explicit. And those words are used quite often, so I just want to take a moment and just kind of define what that means in this context. Systematic and explicit, meaning that it is the direct teaching of a very prescribed scope and sequence in order, following an order of complexity. So it is not something that presents randomly, but that is very prescribed in terms of what students should see first, and so on and so forth. So you'll hear those words thrown around a lot, and that's what they mean. They are also multisensory, meaning that they come through modes visual or auditory, as well as kinesthetic, using bodies and hands, so that the children learn in different modes. And these programs, Fundations specifically, is implemented through all three of those modes. We are expecting next steps to include collaborating with building principals and our literacy coaches and interventionists, classroom teachers, to develop an implementation plan that will include professional learning, critical aspect of implementing a successful program, that we will use our full day and early release days to do this work, as well as job embedded coaching with our coaches as well as our interventionists. We'll collect feedback along the way to see how things are going. hearing about what's going well, anything that needs to be adjusted, and how students, most importantly, are responding to this instruction. And we're looking forward to a really wonderful process as we go through this next year. So thank you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Who wants to start us out with questions tonight? I'm looking at Tina. Oh, Sean's hand is up first.
Not so much a question as a comment. Once again, thank you for doing the work. You know, the parents have been telling us for many years we needed to dig into this curriculum a bit and do better. And I'm glad we did the diligence and aligned with a couple of Gold Star districts and actually observed and came up with a solid recommendation. So thanks for doing the work that we needed to do a long time ago.
Agreed. Good comment, Sean. Ken, was that a question? Or just a thumbs up? Do we have any other questions from board members tonight? I think it's very exciting work. I'm for one very happy to see it being done, whether it's a little late or just right on time, I don't know, but I'm glad it's happening now. Thank you. Amy, sorry, I did not see your hand until now.
I only just put it up.
Okay, good.
Just wondering if, I know we just updated the phonemic awareness resource recently, and I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how this might relate to that, if it relates to it at all, if it's, if they're going to be easy to work with together, just that.
I can take that.
Go ahead, Ellen. No, you got it. You got it. Go ahead.
So phonemic awareness is different than phonics. Phonemic awareness is needed first. That's the ability to hear the sounds in words. So if I say the word cat, you can hear that that's made up of 3 sounds, cat. And in order to be able to read cat, you first need to be able to hear that cat has those 3 sounds, and then we assign letters and sounds, letters to those sounds. So phonics is the assignment of the letters to those sounds. And first we teach the phonemic awareness, which Haggerty is in place now to do. And then we layer on top of that the phonics, which now Fundations will be the means to do that. They do work completely hand in hand. They don't overlap. They are just 2 separate things that have to be taught to help children learn how to read well. So did I answer?
I love that you said layer, because I think of, phonemic awareness as the bottom of the cake, the bottom layer, and then phonics is the next layer. So Ellen said it perfectly. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, thank you. I just was wondering about the transition or the layering and the moving on to this particular.
Good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Corey, can you just clarify, is phonemic awareness being expanded next year? Or is it remaining in the same grades?
Phonemic awareness is currently in pre-K, K, and 1 as part of the regular everyday curriculum. In 2nd grade as needed right now. I look to the team to see how much they feel like it needs to expand into everyday in the way that it is in pre-K, K, and 1. Phonemic awareness is also part of our intervention program. So we also use the same resource to intervene with students who aren't responding to reading instruction in the classroom, because quite often it's related to their ability to do just what Ellen said, really hear those different sounds and distinguish those sounds from each other.
And I'll just add one, excuse me, Dr. De Silva, if I could just add on another component of Fundations that the team welcomed is that handwriting is part of, thanks Sue, that handwriting is part of it. Phonics First could well align itself well with many, if not all, handwriting resources, but Fundations does have it embedded. It's integrated right into the lessons.
And so while when the team looked at our colleagues here looked at the feedback from our teachers, I think that certainly was a layer rather than having to add a handwriting resource onto another program, to have it already be a part of a program that is all in one, just felt like that made a lot of sense and not feel like it's one more ad for our teachers.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Happy to see you coming forward. Thank you. And next up, we have a possible recommendation for a mathematics program.
Great. So here we are, ready to talk about math. And, you know, I already, I thank the collaborative action team for phonics, and I want to do the same for mathematics. We again had a representative group that I'm sure the team is going to talk more about. But I do want to highlight something that is really super special about Ridgefield Public Schools, and that is the instructional leadership that we have in the buildings. Ms. Tuckner just evidenced that with her very content-heavy answer. Our principals are instructional leaders, just like Jill Katkosin, Keith Margolis, and Nancy Karen, who's unfortunately not able to be with us tonight. They led with Ms. Johnson the elementary math curriculum resource cat. So I just want to make sure that we note the work of our leaders that are in our schools, because remember, all this is nice and fun, but if we can't make the implementation stick, then it doesn't matter what resource it is or what's happening. And principals, instructional leaders as principals, are the ones that really make that happen. So special thank you. So I want to give the team a second to introduce themselves, and then we can begin with our math presentation.
So I'll jump in. Good evening once again, Linda Johnson, Director of Elementary Education.
Good evening, I'm Jill Katkosin, the principal at Scotland Elementary School.
Good evening, it's great to be back. Keith Margolis, principal at Branchville Elementary.
Okay, John, we're ready for the PowerPoint. Okay, so you're going to hear another recommendation tonight from the elementary team for a math curriculum resource. Next slide, please. So again, this is another presentation with a recommendation. Again, this is a curriculum resource, not a curriculum change. The math curriculum is staying the same. And I do want to note, like Dr. De Silva noted earlier, that this curriculum resource ask is in our budget fiscal year 23. All right, Linda, take it away. Next slide.
Great. Okay. So first, I'm going to start out with focusing on the process that we followed to reach a decision about adopting and implementing a new research-based curriculum resource to support the teaching and learning of elementary mathematics. You may notice that the process you hear about this evening is very similar to the one that you just heard about and have heard about in the past for phonics. We did this intentionally because we believe this is an effective way to bring members of our teaching and learning community together, teachers, administrators, to work collaboratively around short-term goals. And again, it may sound familiar to you because we did share part of the presentation that you're going to see this evening with you in January, which we did talk about the comprehensive approach to how we teach mathematics kindergarten through 12th grade. And just a reminder that that process includes conceptual understanding, computational fluency, and problem solving kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So the collaborative action team, once again, a representative group, PK through grade 12, to study the 3 curriculum resources that we chose, which were Math in Focus, Think Mathematics, and Developing Roots, and Bridges Mathematics. And we chose those resources intentionally because they are research-based, aligned to our curriculum, and which is aligned to the Common Core state standards. Throughout the process, we did collect feedback and make recommendations, which you're going to hear a little bit more about this evening. And tonight, we will share the results of the thoughtful work that the team engaged in. And before I turn it over to Mr. Margolis, I would like to take this opportunity as well to publicly acknowledge the hard work and commitment of the teachers and administrators who served on the team. And once again, they are representative of all of our teachers and administrators in Ridgefield. They were thoughtful, they asked good questions, and they always considered the needs of our students first. And now I'll turn it over to Keith, who's going to talk just a little bit more about that collaborative action team.
Thanks, Linda. You may remember that this fall, the Math Cat was formed with a clear purpose, and that was to study, explore, and eventually, and here we are today, recommend a research-based math resource. As Linda was talking about, this really was a collaborative effort with many members. And you may remember that we spoke about this at our previous presentation, that the members of the CAT include representatives from all 6 elementary schools, general and special education teachers pre-K-5, administrators from the elementary and the secondary level. Let me take a moment to talk about that. During the last presentation, I discussed that we thought it was important to gain the perspective of our middle school and high school colleagues and to learn how the decision we will make interfaces with the programs and approach of the middle school. In fact, that is Jeff's role largely on the team. And of course, mathematics specialists from the elementary school and the middle schools were part of this team. So the team had several designated times, as you might imagine, for the group to come together to measure the program against our criteria. So I'm going to hand this over to Jill, who will talk specifically about the process the Mathematics CAT has completed.
Thank you so much, Keith. So the process to study and make recommendations for a new math primary resource, which we shared with you in January, is now complete. You may remember that the first part of the process focused on studying 3 curriculum resources. Those included Math in Focus 2020, Methodology, and Bridges Mathematics. As we shared during our previous presentation, the MathCat studied each of these resources, and we looked at various aspects of each, including focus and coherence, scope and sequence, and usability. As a team, we were also able to meet and collaborate with teachers and math leads from neighboring districts to discuss their experiences with these resources. So after we attended presentations, we reviewed materials, team members shared feedback that targeted the important elements of each of these resources. That feedback was discussed at a subsequent team meeting and was referred to in making the recommendation that you're going to hear about this evening. Tonight's presentation represents the second part of this process, which includes making that recommendation regarding the adoption of a new curriculum resource. After reviewing feedback, our team has made recommendations about an implementation plan as well. You will hear more about this after Linda shares briefly about the curriculum resources that we studied.
Okay, thanks, Jill. So next I will tell you a little bit about what we learned about the 3 resources that you see here. As mentioned earlier, all 3 resources have the following in common. First of all, that they are aligned to our curriculum, which is aligned to the Common Core State Standards. They do complement the comprehensive approach that we have for teaching mathematics K through 12, conceptual understanding, computational fluency, and then application in terms of problem solving. And each one of them do follow a systematic scope and sequence, similar to how you heard Mrs. Tuckner speak about the systematic explicit instruction for phonics. That was something that the team looked at and knew were in all 3 of these resources. And the scope and sequence builds on a child's existing understanding, and it has a highly effective framework for progressing student learning. And all of those, the student learning, those learning progressions do support the transition to from 5th to 6th grade. And that was very important when we looked at the resources. Additionally, all 3 resources include the research-based concrete pictorial abstract, which is often referred to as CPA practice. Once again, you may remember that we spoke about this in our presentation in January, but that is a practice that has been used, implemented, and valued greatly in Ridgefield for a good number of years. So again, that was a practice that was in all 3 resources and something that we valued greatly. And just as a reminder, Math in Focus and Developing Roots, Think Math, follow the principles and the philosophies of Singapore math, which we have also used in Ridgefield for a good number of years. The team did find some minor differences between the resources in terms of the focus and coherence, rigor and practices, and usability. And there were some slight nuances in terms of professional learning services. So one other piece that was different between the three resources was that Mathology Developing Roots was the only resource that had a specific scope and sequence and set of practices to kindergarten. So the kindergarten teachers on our team naturally were very excited to see teaching and learning activities for early numeracy skills that are developmentally appropriate, with an emphasis on making connections, discovering patterns, and developing generalizations, which are very, very important when we look at mathematics, learning mathematics across all grades, but especially in the primary grades. And next slide, John. Thanks. So as a result of the comprehensive approach that we had in place, the team has decided that Mathology, Think Mathematics, Developing Roots is the best fit for Ridgefield Public Schools. Therefore, our recommendation is to implement Think Math in grades 3 through 5 next year in all of our elementary schools. Knowing that we do have a new resource in our primary grades, it made sense to bring the math in the intermediate grades, not bringing in two new resources for teachers and students at one time. And then the following year, we would like to look at implementing Think Math in grades 1 and 2, and developing roots in kindergarten. And so in terms of next steps, again, similar to what you heard with the phonics, in collaboration with our building principals, our math specialists, our classroom teachers, we will develop a professional learning plan, and we will take advantage of our full day district professional learning dates, as well as our early release time. Unfortunately, we do have our fantastic math specialists who are able to coach, so they will provide some job embedded experiences working inside our classrooms with our teachers and our students to support the implementation of this new resource. And naturally, we will keep an eye on how the students are responding to instruction. We think that's super important. We'll have conversations, we'll look at how they're responding to lessons, have grade level meetings around the student work, and then we will make adjustments as needed. And we're excited, we're looking forward to it, and we thank you so much for your time and your support, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, great presentation. Who's going to take us out with questions? Tina.
Not a question, more a comment. I just want to say thank you for all the hard work. I'm just going to echo Sean and say, it's great that we're doing this work. I'm so glad that this is, again, it's K-12, because, so many times we've missed this conversation, something that's been taught in elementary does not translate to high school. And we all know that the quicker we capture the kids, the more we get them interested in all subjects. And it's just not about math, but we're talking about math, so I'm going to bring that in. The more we can grow their competency so that they're stronger when they hit high school. And I also was really glad to hear, and I think the fact that it's organic, so you are going to see how kids respond to this teaching, and you're going to learn from that. And it's just not we're done this and we're moving on. So I'm really glad to hear that, because, we sometimes have the best ideas, but sometimes kids learn differently. So I just wanted to call that out and say thank you for that. And again, thank you for doing it K-12. We've needed this for some time, and I'm glad all this work's being done.
Tina, thank you so much. And I think that Keith also echoed that when he was speaking. And it also really helps us fully utilize Jeff's new position, this 612 position, and what he brings to it with all his experience being the department chair at the high school. He and Linda work closely in all of this with the administrators and the teachers. And you're right, you can't do one thing in elementary without figuring out what the impact will be as students move up. So I'm really excited for this partnership. And I just want to reiterate what you're saying. Yes, it's exciting.
Any other questions or comments, Ken? Mute. Ken, you're on mute. Ken, you're on mute.
You know what? This is going to be the last time we're going to have to do this, Jonathan. April,
He's passionate.
he was passionate. Ken, you
Ken,
were
I'm
on.
sure that was a great comment. We didn't hear it, but I'm sure it was great.
There we go.
Is this better?
This is much better.
Okay, so I was hoping that Dr. De Silva could maybe speak to why these are currently called possible recommendations and not these weren't presentations on this is the curriculum that we're adopting for next school year.
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, when we started the presentation, I wondered that myself, Ken, and I think the team probably looked at it. It's really more of a question for Corey, but the team probably looked at it at the recommendations that they were possibly considering, but coming to you with a firm recommendation. Maybe it was supposed to be a surprise, the element of surprise at the board meeting. I'm not sure, Corey, but I did think
Nothing's official till we present to the board. So I think that was where the possible probably came from. But yes, this will now be the recommendation because we have presented to the board the process, the evidence, and you've heard from the teams.
I just wanted, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't somehow tied up in the budget process. So if the budget was approved at a different amount, that would affect anything that we're hearing tonight.
Well, that's true. It could possibly affect what we're hearing tonight, but the recommendation of the type of program wouldn't change, right? So we're not going to change from Fundations to Phonics First, or we're not going to change from methodology to math and focus. So that's true. So we'll get rid of the possible from now on. One of the things that I do want to draw your attention to, and Linda didn't mention it, but just to really think about the thoughtfulness of the implementation plan. And had the benefit of working with Linda Johnson across many years, and I have seen her and her colleagues implement programs and do that really, really well across high performing communities. And the one most significant piece of that success has been in the implementation, not really the selection of the program. That's an important piece without a doubt, but it has been in the implementation. And what I wanted to point out is that if you notice in the math presentation that the math implementation is in grades 3 through 5 and not in pre-K to 2. And naturally, we're hearing a presentation around phonics happening in pre-K to 2, and that intentionality around how much PD, how much newness can a team of teachers sustain in a year in order to have the work stick is a really important conversation. And so all of these programs, they're obviously rich in many things, and the digital side to them, in addition to the textbook resources, the manipulatives, all of that, the professional learning. But at the end of the day, if we don't implement this well, truly it's just a waste of money. And, I've seen very good programs, or experienced and heard of many good programs that found great success in some communities and failed in others. And when you ask yourselves, why could that be? If it's a great program, it should be a great program across communities, regardless of the students, regardless of the families, regardless of the teachers. But at the end of the day, it comes through that implementation plan. If you go too big, if you go too little, if you're not focused, if you don't have teachers engaged in the process, if your administrators aren't part of that professional learning, so that when they're going in to evaluate their teachers or to support their teachers, they too have that same common lens, it all fails. And so for all of the work that these folks have done to study the programs, I think the most important piece that we really had to pay attention to is that implementation phase. And I look forward to, of course, us moving in this direction for next year, and hopefully the budget supports that. But I really look forward to hearing from the committee again next year around how it's going, right? And the implementation, just like you heard with Hegarty this year, and the implementation of that. It's not just we do it and then we present and it's over. So I look forward to that.
I do too. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Just one aside before we go, because I have Mr. Margulis here. Mr. Margulis, your daughter was absolutely fantastic in the Scottsbridge musical, and I saw it two different nights. I just wanted to pass it on. She was great.
That's really kind, Jonathan, and likewise. It was an incredible performance all around. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, moving on, we have the digital citizenship and one-to-one initiative update.
Hi,
Right.
everyone.
Never mind. No, it's all yours, Dr. Panda.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I'm so excited, Susie. I can't wait. And also, I'm just going to answer Ken's question now. Yes, the budget will affect the outcome of this presentation. All right, so I will just present my screen. Can everyone see it? My presentation? All right, great. All right, so this is a quick update on where we are in the technology department for March 2022. So where are we with our digital citizenship work? First thing to know about digital citizenship, it is an up and coming subject. So there are resources out there. There are free resources, there are paid resources. The state has some guidelines on it, but there's nothing really hard set in stone. We have been looking at all of the resources out there, and I can honestly say that most of the free resources are probably the superior one. We've been working with our library media specialists and our tech integrators on these resources, and it looks like we're starting to settle on some of them, and most of them are free. I think that the paid resources are actually more for the upper levels, more technology for research, like how to find proper information through peer-reviewed journals and those sort of things. So, but when it comes to like the younger children, it's a little bit easier. So for some of our new board members and people who are watching, I'm going to kind of go over how we've set up our district right now with our current one-to-one initiative and how that connects to digital citizenship. Students K through 3 have Chromebooks in the classroom. So if there's an emergency or there's a scenario, everyone can get a Chromebook and go home. But the real reason is that we have access to these Chromebooks, but we want reduced screen time for our children K through 3. This is something that we've met with community, and they seem very pleased with this outcome. The main issue here is, and this is, I did not come up with this term, so I'm not that smart, but these children are coming in as digital natives, but we want to make them digital citizens, right? They grew up in a world of technology. A lot of our children, by the time they entered kindergarten, have already had a lot of experience with computer screens and technology of that like, but we are trying to get them into a proactive view of looking at technology as a tool rather than just a source of entertainment. Then in 4th and 5th grade, they get their first take-home Chromebook that they have for themselves, right? This is their device. Also, we are doing different levels of engagement with outside, with the internet, with, let's say, K through 3, then 4 through 5, then middle school and high school. So if I'm an elementary school student and I get one of these Chromebooks, it's very locked down. They don't have email, they can't chat with each other. Even like YouTube has to go through this special filter thing. We even filter many things on kids' YouTube because even YouTube for children has things on it that are inappropriate. So we work very hard to make sure that our children are protected. And this is why we have a one-to-one initiative with compulsory district devices K through 8, because we feel that those are developmentally appropriate time to have those types of locks. Now, when a student moves into middle school, the expectations are raised. The students get an email, they get very limited chat function, but those emails can't email with anyone in the outside world. It's just with anyone in the RPS domain. And of course, they have access to more robust tools within Google and other third-party plugins that we get. And last but not least, we have what we call advanced digital citizenship, where in high school level, those students have the choice of either using a district Chromebook, which we can provide them. And this is a Chromebook that is somewhat locked down, but when you're in high school, we unlock a lot more open chat. You have the ability to have your email used for, of course, outside sources, which is really important for when you're applying for colleges and grants and everything, to have that actual educational public email. So it's very important that we give access to that. But as you can see, we have broken down into 3-ish kind of zones. What are we doing to actually educate students on using the technology? So I worked very closely with Cora, and we felt the best way to do this was through the library media specialists. The students are already going there for many other things. And we also had a rock star in our district, and that's the middle schools. The middle schools have been in one-to-one the longest. And they've developed an amazing, and I'm gonna just shout out, Kim Moran, Janine and Tanya. Jean is at CERMS and Tanya's at Eastridge. They've been working many years to have a great introduction when students come in, digital citizenship of ways to find information, spotting fake news, how to promote yourself online properly. All of these things have been started at the middle school level. But if I look at this sheet, and again, it's a lot of information here, so we're just paraphrasing it. There wasn't much technology prior to COVID at the K-5 level. So starting this year was the first year that elementary schools really had this higher level of technology. So our focus this year was training the LMS crew on just the technology themselves. You can't really teach someone about digital citizenship is A, if you don't have any technology, and B, you don't really know how to use it. So this year, we're doing two things with the LMS. We're training them just on deployment, understanding, troubleshooting, and just how the kids actually interact with the technology. And then two is finding those resources so we can start coming up with a curriculum where we can interact with these topics with our students. The issue right now, I wouldn't really say it's much of an issue, is we're really kind of starting from square one at the elementary level. And then at the high school level, their issue is the type of capture time. Right now, it's all volunteer based when a teacher wants to take their students down to the library at the high school level. At the elementary level, they have built-in time throughout every cycle at the elementary level. So we're going to start figuring out when we want to start introducing certain digital citizenship lessons, like, how to be safe online, keyboarding skills for very young children. Where are we going to start putting these points throughout the year? The high school, we are working with Dr. Greenwood and the leadership at the high school to figure out where those capture points are going to be. And we're focusing on 9th and 10th grade. We feel that by 11th and 12th grade, you're applying to colleges. We're hoping that you should be developed enough where you won't need to have these lessons, but that could change. So how does this work with where we're moving with the actual moving forward with technology in the district? Everything I just said, all the work that we've done on beginning to create a digital citizenship curriculum with the LMS, and again, I've also been working with Corey, Jeff Corbishley, Linda Johnson, Ann Tucci. So it takes a village. If we can't support the budget, then we are no longer a one-to-one district. Right now, which this board has approved for 2 years in a row, the plan that my crew came up with of introducing new Chromebooks for 6th and 9th grade, maybe 4th grade, depending on how much enrollment we get. And you can see that sort of complicated cycle, but basically the older Chromebooks go to the younger kids and the middle school and high school kids get newer Chromebooks. If we can't support this whole system breaks down. And we're going to have to start back with, or to rule a triage, which groups no longer get computers. And it'd be kind of rough to be a district of our standing to be a one-to-one for 1 year and return to not one-to-one. In fact, we might be one of the few school districts in Connecticut after this year that would not be able to be one-to-one if we don't support this budget. So not to be doom and gloom, but this is how serious it is. We are at a very unique time right now where we have enough resources in the district to launch this in a way that I feel is fiscally responsible. Underneath this, you'll see, and I keep talking about it, is building capacity for technology cycles. And this is something that our district just never really did before, where we start building in yearly cycles so we have a predictable technology budget. Next year, we're going to start looking at classroom technology at the high school, revamping that, replacing the desktop technology, because we're getting these new ViewSonic touch boards, but they're higher resolution. So the older computers are really struggling to run the software. And then the year after that, middle school, elementary school, and then those classroom computers can last another 6 to 7 to 8 years. We start focusing on the teacher computers. If this isn't supported, we're back to me coming to the board many times throughout the year and hoping that we can find money in other areas and kind of emergency transferring that. And to be honest, I don't think that's a way that we'd want to run the district. We want to be able to plan and have a good ability to forward think and understand, hey, I can go to a middle school principal, I can go to an elementary school principal, say, this year, that is your year that your school gets all new technology for X, Y, and Z reasons, because we built in a responsible technology cycle. So that's my spiel on that. I'll move on to two more little items that we've talked about. Starting after spring break, that's it, right? After next week, right? It's spring break. Phew, you can have a little break then. After spring break, we're bringing multi-factor authentication security to all staff members and people that work in the district. We're going with a product called Duo. It's already been implemented with some volunteers. I'm using it. You can see that this little key fob right here. This is one of the ways that if you don't have a cell phone or any other technology, you can multi-factor in. We've all experienced this where you might sign into your bank, they text you a number, you type in the number. We're going to be implementing this. And this is, again, something that basically every municipality in Connecticut school district needs to do. And you board members will need to do that too. So at some point when we're all back in person, probably early May, I'll be training all of you, the board members, on how to use multi-factor authentication to get into your RPS accounts. Last and certainly not least, Monday, I will be seeing all of you in person in our space at the new Board of Ed, 90 East Ridge Road. I just want people to say that this is a duct tape and bubblegum setup. We are still waiting for a lot of equipment to come in. And I want people who are listening to this to realize that when you come in, there's going to be wires hanging everywhere. The equipment that we're using to film this is not the actual official equipment. We will not have robust sound equipment. We will not have all the niceties that will be coming in, hopefully in the not too distant future, but we felt that it's very important to meet in person, to interact with the public. We just hope that you please pardon our appearance during this time where we're just kind of like in the mid zone of hopefully getting that new board space up and running. But when it is up and running, it'll be really, really pretty and really nice. Other than that, that is it for tried to make it quick. I don't want us to go too late, technology update, and I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Sean, you're up.
A couple of questions. One is what's the ETA for the boardroom real legit equipment? Do we have an updated revised ETA?
So I met with the company today. If I waited for a product called the Crestron controller, it's July. But I think I could swap it out with another product that's made by company AMX, and I'm hoping mid-May. That's the goal. We basically have 80% of some of the equipment, but of course the main equipment, like the brain stuff where all the wires are going to go to, that's the stuff that's on super long wait times. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, May-ish. So and I'm having weekly meetings with them, but that's where I'm at. But we are starting on Monday, no matter what, with whatever I got.
Semiconductors, I know. Stupid
it
semiconductors.
It is.
And so the one-to-one stuff, we will need a whole bunch of new Chromebooks and things. How's supply chain and price hikes looking for that? Because I'm in my personal life just got an email of ugly price hikes and things like that. So computer prices typically go down year after year. That's not the current pattern. They're going up and it's ugly.
It's very ugly. This is why I built, if you remember my budget, I had the yellow bar, which was Chromebooks, and then the blue bar, that was the flex. I would say that's the flex money, because I went and got a quote for the Chromebooks 2 weeks before I presented to you. And then the day that I presented to you, just for ha-has, I got a quote, and each Chromebook was already $15 more, which when you buy over 1,000 Chromebooks, that adds up really quick. So this is why it's important for that. I can get the Chromebooks. I have talked to our main distributor. The price is going to be the mystery. I hope, and I'm knocking on wood right now, you can't see it, that the price doesn't go up any further. But we can supply at least the Chromebooks. Desktop computers, that's a big mystery. Other parts, that's a big mystery. The access points I ordered back in September. Who knows when I'm going to get those?
Don't ask me about those.
I know, yeah. but the Chromebooks are I can get those. So that is something that we will be able to get. I just won't know the final price until probably June.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
Oh,
Thanks, Sean. Anyone else? Amy?
Wes, I just want to say I'm always so impressed with all of your presentations. So thank you so much for doing all this. And I love your foresight that you've created this whole cycle system. I'm very impressed with it. I'm just wondering, I know the kids in high school have the option to bring in their own devices. Is that something that you'll be offering for middle school kids or even elementary school kids?
So this is something we talked about with the community, and the reason why we don't offer that with the elementary and middle school level is just the kids, we learned during COVID, we let kids do that because we couldn't, at the time we couldn't afford to buy kids computers, and or they weren't even available. So when we could buy them, you couldn't get them. So we're very thankful that the community stepped in and helped us get through COVID. The problem was we had a lot of behavioral issues, a lot of inappropriate use of technology, and I won't go any further than that. And we felt that it's developmentally appropriate for us to be able to control what's happening K through 8. And even when we control the devices, where I can see all the things that the kids are emailing, we could see any type of things that they're chatting in their Google Classroom, a lot of things happen. We have disciplinary issues. And if a student is bringing their own device, that is in a black hole. We have no idea what they're using. Some of these kids are smart. Especially the middle schoolers, they understand how to use VPNs and tunneling software and stuff like that. So they're doing things inappropriately in school. That's why we kind of said, when you get to high school, you're becoming more of an adult. We're letting you bring your own device. It's up to the teacher and their classroom etiquette to figure out what is appropriate in that classroom. I know some classrooms where teachers don't really want tech out because they're doing certain things. And then you go into other classroom and every kid has like a high-end PC or MacBook because they're all doing things that they feel that they need for that course. So that is the main reason why that we make it compulsory to use a district computer. We feel it's developmentally appropriate, it's safe for children, it's solved a lot of problems, and we're able to track things too. So that's the main reason.
I want to say I really appreciate that. I have 4 kids in elementary school right now, and it's funny, my oldest is in 5th grade, and I can overhear him talking to his younger brother or siblings saying, your teachers know everything you're doing. Make sure, he wants them to make sure that they're doing everything appropriately and that teachers are always watching. And so they are in the habit of making good choices when they do have their devices. So thank you for that.
Great. No, absolutely. And that's what we want.
Thanks, Amy. Any other comments or questions? No, Wes, thank you. Oh, Selena.
I want to echo Amy. I admire you so much, Wes, what you're doing and what you have done on a shoestring budget. My hat is off to you. I mean, you're incredibly brilliant. So thank you for your presentation and what you continue to do, and good luck. My fingers are crossed.
Thank you. So are mine. And I just want to say that I'm only as good as the other leadership here. I couldn't do any of this stuff without Susie, Corey, and Liz. I mean, they're amazing. Also in that picture, when you saw, Joe was standing in the background supervising me when we were setting up the cameras too. So it takes
everybody. Yeah, definitely. Just the technology aspect it's just, wow.
Duct tape and bubble gum on April 4th. That's what I heard.
Yep.
Duct tape and bubble gum.
Duct tape and bubble gum.
Ken?
Since Wes answered my question at the beginning of his presentation, I'll just have a comment. I just think it's important for the public that's listening to know that we really need your support on the budget for initiatives like this. The administration works so hard to create the school district that we all want as a town. But if the town, including the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, don't support the budget, then what you're hearing about isn't the school district that we're going to get. So I just want to emphasize that fact as many times as I can.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else? No? Thanks again. Thanks again for being voluntold into this position, and
Yep.
thanks for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
And moving on to the Rachel portion of the evening, starting with the second read of policy 5131.911. Do we have a motion?
Sure. I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5131.911, bullying prevention and intervention.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Sean, thank you. Any comments or questions on the second read for this policy? Was anything brought up in committee, Rachel?
Nope.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hands. That's 9 unanimous. Thank you very much. And we can move on to the second read for policy 5114. Do I have a motion?
So I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5114, student discipline.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ken, thanks. Any concerns, questions, comments on this one? Anything out of committee?
No.
Okay. There being none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. That's 9 unanimous again. Thank you very much. Motion carries. And now we can move on to the first reads, starting with policy 1110.1.
So the first policy up, parent-teacher communication, RPS policy 1110.1. This policy was last revised on 4/6/2009. It was in the Shipman and Goodwin Fall 2021 policy update. It is a required policy as noted by CAVE, and it is mentioned in the 2019 audit. As per the Shipman and Goodwin Fall update, the red line revisions in front of you comply with Public Act number 21-46. Number 1, they offer parents the option of attending parent-teacher conferences remotely, and 2, to conduct additional parent-teacher conferences during periods of remote learning in certain instances. That language and revision can be found on the bottom of page 1, A and B. The new law also requires school districts to collect certain emergency contact information and provide, after January 1st, 2022, a document to be developed by the State Department of Education concerning educational, safety, mental health, and food insecurity resources at any parent-teacher conference required during a period of remote learning. That language and revision can be seen at the bottom of page 1C, and then the second page, last paragraph. So just a couple of notes here. The Shipman and Goodwin version is recommended to replace our current policy with added revisions as recommended by committee. Our current policy lacked a how-to, that's what we talked about in committee, and it was really out of date, unfortunately, since the last revision was 2009. The how-to in my mind was because it talked about being a knowledgeable partner, and it was under communications, parent involvement, but yet there was no distinct method in the current policy clarifying how to be that knowledgeable partner and communicate and involve parents. So the Shipman and Goodwin version highlights the parent-teacher relationship by including ways for regular communication, but also clarifying on the law regarding parent-teacher conferences. If you look at the first paragraph, second sentence, this is added language in committee that we're recommending. It says the board believes that parents are most knowledgeable when they have regular communication with teachers, and then added language, which is essential to student achievement. Just for your notes, the third paragraph down, the first page of the policy, that is directly where it says the procedures. That is directly from Public Act 21-46. It's actually page 21 of 43 of the Act. The paragraph down from that, A, B, and C, those are all from Public Act 21-46. And then for your notes, it's on page 22 of 43 of the Public Act. On page 2 of this policy, you'll note this last paragraph, and I just want to make a quick note about that again. It does reference section B, and as required by section B, if in a remote learning situation. So that last section is if we were in a remote learning situation. Are there any questions or comments from board members on this policy?
Seemed very clear and forward to me. Anybody else have questions or comments about it? Looks like this one's okay to bring back for a second read.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. So the next one, the following 5 policies, oops, sorry, that's my dog. The following 5 policies were unanimously approved. Ooh, again, I guess she doesn't like me talking right now. On May 24th, 2021. But since that date, Public Act 21-79 was approved on June 28, 2021. And recent notices of interpretation by the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights have been issued since May 24th, which has resulted in the following revisions to these policies. Can you guys hear me? I'll use your voice and speak up. You're good? Okay. So, first policy, Equal Opportunity Plan, Non-Discrimination, RPS Policy 0521. As per the Shipman and Goodwin Fall Update, the red lines in this policy reflect changes made by the Act 21-79 to the statutory definition of veteran. They also clarified that complaints can be filed regarding discrimination and harassment. And in light of the recent notice of interpretation issued by the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, they clarified that complaints based on allegations of discrimination or harassment for reasons such as gender identity or sexual orientation will be handled pursuant to the board's policies regarding sex discrimination and sexual harassment. So let's take a look at this policy. If you take a look at the first paragraph, you'll see the added language of or harassment. The second paragraph, there's no edits. However, just for your notes, if you wanted to write down, that's could be found in the General Statute Section 1-1N. The next paragraph is the updated definition of veteran. The updated definition includes or released with an other than honorable discharge based on a qualifying condition from, and then the qualifying conditions are underneath. Just for your notes, that's Public Act 21-79, and the definition can be found in the first page of the Public Act, and the qualifying conditions, which are listed here, are on page 2 of that Public Act. Okay. The second page of the policy, there are no, I'm sorry, it's actually the first page on the bottom. For the purposes of this policy, that next paragraph there is language from the Crown Act, Bill number 6515. There's no edits, just so that you have it for your notes. The next paragraph has the updating of or harassment. And then you will see the third paragraph down on the second page. That is the clarification of complaints as per the notice of interpretation. Are there any questions on this policy? Okay, and my dog has left the room.
For a second as well.
Oh, great. Okay. Next policy is sex discrimination, Title IX, and harassment in the workplace, 4118.1. So as per the Shipman and Goodwin Fall 2021 update, In light of the recent notice of interpretation issued by the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, we have revised this policy and administrative regulations to clarify that Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. The committee has also made the recommendation for some formatting changes to the current policy just to align with the Shipman and Goodwin model. So in taking a look at it, you will notice in the second paragraph, that is the new language inserted as per the recent notice of interpretation by the U.S. Department of Ed. On the bottom of the page, you'll see just a cross out of the title discrimination, and now sex discrimination is highlighted just to match the Shipman and Goodwin model. On the second page, again at the top, you'll see the title harassment deleted, and then sexual harassment under Title IX is highlighted. And then you'll see underneath reporting sex discrimination or sexual harassment in green. All of that language was there prior in our current policy, but the sentences, however, were just out of order. So whoever reviews this policy next, it'll just make it easier for them to simply review apples to apples. Any questions on this policy? Okay, so moving right along. The next policy is non-discrimination, personnel series, RPS policy 4118.11. So this policy shares the same updates as policy 0521. Just going through it, you'll notice in the second paragraph, the addition of or harassment. Then also again, you'll see a green paragraph. That's just because some of the paragraphs were out of order, so we're just reformatting it so it matches the Shipman and Goodwin model. You'll see the update to the definition of veteran at the bottom of the page. On the second page, you will see another green paragraph because it was out of order. And then or harassment, added language. And then finally, in the last paragraph, the clarification of complaints under Title IX. Any questions with this policy? Okay, wonderful. Moving right along. The next policy is non-discrimination student series, RPS policy 5145.4. So this policy also shares updates as per policy 0521 and 4118.11. You will notice again, one second here. I lost my place. Second paragraph, the addition of or harassment, the updated definition of veteran. And again, on the second page, another updated or harassment, and then the clarification of language once again. Pretty simple since they're all the same. Any questions? Okay, one more here. So we have sex discrimination, Title IX, and sexual harassment, student series, RPS policy 5145.5. This policy shares the same update as policy 4118.1. It revises the policy for clarification. The Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And you will see that updated language here in the first paragraph. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you, everyone. So we're moving on now to the next policy up for review, which is health assessments and oral assessments. This is policy 5141.3. Let me just get to my place. Okay, so on 214, this policy was approved with the recommended updates, including more stringent language of would be required to give consent prior, as opposed to opt out. In the subsection 7 of this policy, other non-emergency invasive physical examinations and screenings. It was concluded that this policy would go back to committee after approval to review through the lens of our conversation as a board on 2/15. So I want to report to you what we talked about in committee the last 2 meetings. So on 3/1, being mindful of all comments made, the committee went through the entire policy, its purpose, and each subsection. I even used the health assessment record, which can be found on the RPS homepage. And the health assessment record is something that families may bring to their family doctor for their child's physical in the beginning of a school year. And I use this to help clarify the purpose of some of the sections. So on the health assessment record, the first page is to be filled out by parents. The second page, part 2, is a medical evaluation to be completed by the healthcare provider. Section 2 of this policy is health assessments required. Part 3 of the health assessment record is oral health assessments and screening. Part 3 of this policy is oral health assessments. Part 4 of the health assessment record is the immunization record, and we have another policy that covers immunizations. So that's something that we did to help cover some of the sections here in this policy. We also went over the history and genesis of PPRA and the language in subsection 7. We acknowledged that this subsection has caused the most alarm, and obviously as a board, we want to try to put families at ease. So a recommendation was made in the meeting that day on 3/1 to remove the language in the subsection 7, since the exact language lies in our student privacy policy 5125.1 as approved on 2/28 with the more stringent language. That way anyone reading the language would know that it is connected to PPRA, because in that specific policy, we're notifying parents of their rights, just like we do with surveys. However, after making that recommendation, we met again on this policy on 3/21 to review council's input on our recommendation. And their input was not to remove the subsection 7, but we could add language into the section that refers to the student privacy policy as per PPRA. So after syncing council's recommendations, the committee has brought forth to you today 2 options for full board discussion, a first read regarding subsection 7 of the policy. I have faith in the 9 of us. I think we can choose a version today and put that version forward for a second read for next time. So let's take a look at those 2 options. So option 1, if you look in subsection 7, this is the section that has the more stringent language as adopted on 2/14. And also you'll see blue highlighted paragraph. So we added in some language here. In accordance with federal law, the board adopts the provisions relating to student privacy, PPRA. The following provision in this subsection refers to section 4 of policy 5125.1, student privacy, as per the Protection of the Pupil Rights Amendment, PPRA. So this language adds clarification of where the section comes from, and right now it is missing that. In option 2, you'll see that the language in subsection 7 is stricken, but there's a paragraph clarifying what the subsection is for. And it says, in accordance with federal law, the board adopts the provisions relating to student privacy, PPRA, section 4 of policy 5125.1, student privacy, as per the Protection of the Pupil Rights Amendment, PPRA, references the provision of other non-emergency invasive physical examinations and screenings. So those are the 2 options in which the committee worked really hard on to bring to you today. Jonathan, I guess I'll leave it to you on how you want to do this
First off,
now.
did the committee have a recommendation on one versus the other?
I mean, I think we could go around, but I think we felt as a committee, we wanted to bring to you, and please policy members jump in, but we felt that we wanted to bring two versions to the full board. Since we had just a robust conversation last time, and we really wanted just to be mindful and seek everyone's input in moving forward.
So let's start with people who are not on the policy committee. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments relating to these two potential pathways to take? Liz?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten quite a bit of community input on this. A lot of questions, thankfully, were raised. As you know, I did not vote for it to go in, and I won't again. The intent of the policy is still in that section is still unclear as to RPS's rules. Pushing this off and saying, well, we're going to follow the federal guidelines doesn't interpret the policy for Ridgefield Public Schools. It simply says we're either going to copy and paste a portion of the PPRA or we're just going to refer to it. So go link it here. In our prior conversation, including council, there was no rationale for these tests or non-invasive, non-emergency physical examinations provided. We still don't put that in here. We don't. Any policy should be explicitly clear as to its intent per section. If the intent is simply to say, well, we're in accordance with federal law, we should just have a policy that says we're in accordance with all federal laws. Have a great day. In this particular instance, given the language here and the assault on parental rights that could be interpreted, not that that's the intent, I would say the language in here should be, it is the express intent of RPS to never do these things. And if they do, we will get express guardianship approval. And it says it up in the top, but it doesn't repeat it here. And we repeat other things. So my recommendation would be to explicitly add that language that RPS has absolutely no intention of doing any non-emergency invasive physical examinations and screening without express approval of the guardian of a student. And we will follow the federal, then you can reference the federal regulation. That would be my recommendation. So frankly, I don't think either of these are, one just strikes the language and says the same thing, and the other one just says, go look at the federal law. So neither one of them really have any additional clarity to what was put in there. So that's just my thoughts. And I'm still vehemently against putting something like this in that just simply says, well, we're going to, instead of actually addressing the issues that both we had a discussion on and the public has had concerns about, we're just going to, say, forget it, just look at the federal law. And that to me is an abdication of the concern being actually resolved.
Thank you, Liz. Other comments? Tom, that your hand?
Yeah, thank you. One fact I think I want to point out is at the meeting, at the committee meeting, the question was raised whether in the 7 years or so that this policy has been in effect, and please correct me, Dr. De Silva, if I'm wrong, but in the 7 years that this policy has already been in effect, there has not been any complaints or issues or violations or concerns raised by any parent, teacher, or child that anything inappropriate or invasive was done. I just think that's an important thing to point out. That may not swing the discussion either way, but when you look back at the last 7 or so years, it doesn't sound like there's been any incidents that have arisen that would raise a concern, for whatever that's worth.
Thank you, Tom. Sean?
Yeah, I could probably go through and find 24 of the policies in here that have never been enacted in the last 7 years or the last 20 years. It doesn't mean they're not there, and it doesn't mean they're not there for a reason. And I think Liz is just searching for what that reason is, and we still haven't come up with one as to why we even need or have this policy. And we've spent probably now 2 hours in this board, and I don't know how many hours in the other board, discussing a policy that we'll never use, and we don't know why it's there. And I don't get any of this.
Oh, everything went quiet. Can you hear me?
He said Ken, he was on mute.
Good. Okay. No, and I agree. And that was the challenge, Sean, that we had even in committee. And I think for the original discussion, and to Liz's point, even when the lawyer was there, we don't know why this policy exists from a federal level. The reason that we have it in our policy is because it is required on the federal level. So that's the reason we have it. Why it's a policy in the first place, that we haven't been able to get a good explanation, at least not one that satisfies me. Rebecca didn't have one, and it essentially boiled down to we need to have a policy for it because there is a federal policy for it, and that's my understanding of it, speaking from Rebecca. So it's almost like it's like an everybody's right thing, but the reason that we have it is because we're following federal law. I know that doesn't help that piece.
Thanks, Ken. Sean, another comment?
Yeah, quick redirect. My understanding in the last discussion is there are many districts near us that don't have this policy. So I guess I'm really confused why we shouldn't or couldn't table this, get a real answer as to why it's even here, and then come back to this board with actual information. We've got nothing actionable here. 2 meetings more with the policy committee, and we know nothing more about the rationale than we did back in February, and that's kind of troubling to me.
Tabling this would leave the policy is in force now.
I understand and agree with that.
Okay.
But I think we need to understand why the policy is there before we even make changes to the one that's there. We've already made changes and we don't know why. We don't know why it's there. We don't know why we changed what was there. We don't know why we have what we have now. And we don't know where it came from. And there are districts near us that look like us that don't have it. And I don't even know why. None of this makes sense to me.
Got it. Thanks, Sean.
So just a couple of things, if I may, Jonathan. So just one piece of clarity I really would like to make as a full board here. So the policy is on health assessment screenings and oral health assessments. So the purpose of this policy is in the first paragraph, and it is that the Ridgefield Board of Education, the board, requires each student enrolled in the Ridgefield Public Schools, the district, to undergo health assessments as mandated by state law. The purpose of such health assessments shall be to ascertain whether a student has any physical disability tending to prevent the student from receiving the full benefit of schoolwork, and to ascertain whether schoolwork should be modified in order to prevent injury to the student or to secure a suitable program of education for the student. I think the question is really what has caused alarm is this subsection 7. So it's not the policy as a whole, but it is this subsection. Now, this subsection, and I went through this in policy committee, and I want to go through this again here because maybe it would shed a little bit of light. I went through the genesis of PPRA and the purpose of why this legislation was put out there. So it started in 1974. And PPRA was originally enacted in 1974, and it provided parents rights to access instructional materials that were designed to explore or develop new or improved teaching methods or techniques. In 1978, parent consent was added before obtaining information from students. Topics such as political affiliations, mental and psychological problems, sex behavior and attitudes, illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating and demeaning behavior, critical appraisals of other individuals with whom respondents have close family relationships, legally recognized relationships, and income. In 1994, it was amended again to broaden the consent requirements, that educational agencies and institutions shall give parents and students effective notice of their rights under this section. In 2002, under President Bush, the No Child Left Behind Act was passed. And in a section at the end of the act entitled Repeals, Redesignations, and Amendments to Other Statutes, an update to PPRA was passed. It added opt-out requirements, limited ability to collect information for commercial purposes, and for certain physical exams, and also provide parents with access rights to instructional materials and surveys and evaluations. So that's kind of the genesis, if you will, of the language of PPRA. But I don't believe that this came out of any particular circumstance, but only to protect the rights of parents, actually, and to notify them, if anything, since parents are responsible for the welfare of their children. I think it had good intent all along. That doesn't mean that all legislation ends up perfect, but I don't think that there was anything that happened that this particular circumstance came out of. I understand that it's frustrating that we don't have examples. It's very frustrating to me that there's no examples in the law. I mean, I went through each and every amendment to PPRA, but I do feel that by not writing anything, we're not being fully transparent, that there is this federal law out there that protects parents' rights, protects our children, because God forbid, you wouldn't want any of this to happen. So it's really protecting our children. I mean, for me, Jonathan, I'll just throw it out there, because obviously in policy committee, I thought about this a lot. Because I use the health assessment record to go through this policy and its purpose, I believe that made clear the spirit of this policy as a whole. So I believe option 2 is better, because the language concerning PPRA and other non-emergency invasive physical examination and screenings is already in the student privacy policy. And if we're operating around the common goal of making this policy, the entire policy, clear to families, then we should reference and not include it here as if it were a part of the health assessment record, because it's not. And then optically, I believe option 2 shows that this is not our current practice, but yet we're notifying families of a federal law and their rights under it. So that's my opinion. I'll leave it there. And
Jonathan, I recognize there are many hands up, but if I can just add to Rachel's piece, I think Rachel is right. And into something that Sean said, where other districts may have not included this part in their policy, I think that's where the confusion comes from, is the add-on to the health assessments, because it appears like this is something we do as part of a child's entrance into our school system. And that the reality is it's not. And I can't remember who said it on the 14th, but one of the comments was, well, then just leave it in the student privacy policy. And that's the only place that it's necessary, is it's part of student privacy. We're not going to do any of these things without families knowing. And in our case, without families agreeing to. So it's not even an opt-out. You have to opt in. And so to Rachel's point about the confusion about where it's landing, by just including the language, I think it does take away that this is part of a health assessment, a traditional process that a child would go through, and that's just not the case. So if we limited it and kept it to option 2, I think it does clarify why this is really here. And so again, the spirit is to protect families in absence of it. And, I recognize that Rebecca was not able to give us examples, nor were we, and that is a reality. And so that's important to note. But at the same time, what our attorney has said is that the spirit of this is to protect our families and our kids from someone just taking it upon themselves to do this. So instead, we have a policy that says, no, you're not going to do any of this without parents opting in. And so from that vantage point, I do recognize that it's a lot of anxiety, but that option 2, where it eliminates all that language in the health assessments, but notifies families that any of this, they would have an opt-in option in PPRA with the other policy.
Thank you. We have Selena, then Liz, then Sean.
Is it possible, since Sean knows of districts that did not include this, but Susie, you said there was some funding or something that was tied to this, right?
Well, I think the federal law, Selena indicates that because it's federal law, that if we didn't have a policy around this, any federal funding could be impacted.
Right. So I would think that it would be hard for a district to not include this, but somehow some districts are not including this according to Sean. So maybe Sean could get with you and let you know which districts aren't including this, and you all could come up with a way to, not include this. It's strange to me that a district wouldn't include it and lose funding.
Selena, I think it goes back to what I mentioned before, is that some school districts may not be including it in their health assessment piece just because it doesn't feel like it's there, but they are including it in their.
So they put it somewhere.
It's likely in their student privacy policy somewhere, but perhaps not in the health assessment. And I think that's what's bringing a lot of anxiety to families, understandably. If you think this is
what Rachel said about including like the number 2, the second option is a better choice, right? I agree with her. Yeah, as long as it's transparent, though, because you don't want families to think that we're going to do something that we shouldn't be doing or whatever. I mean, it was a non-issue until this year. I mean, like Tom said, I don't even know why it's an issue, but.
Well, I do think that there was a subtle change, and clearly, Rachel, you've done so much work around this. I think the subtle change was that it was added to 5141.3, like the title was added in there. Am I correct, Rachel? We've had so many revisions, but.
So we did have a revision of the title of this, and we combined, yes, an oral health assessment.
So was there change in any of the language though? Because this was actually approved by people who are now complaining about it, which I find very strange, but they approved it. So was anything actually changed in the language though? There wasn't, right? In the actual language of the policy. But now they're complaining about it. So that's a little confusing.
So we really can't recreate what went on when this policy first was approved many years ago. But there is this language here, which does cause, although it is a list of things the district is saying they won't do, just being a list of things that sounds like this does cause some consternation, and I understand why. So one of the options here, the option 2, is to strike that language and just refer back to the PPRA. And that's what we're looking at now. Liz, you had a comment or a question, and then Sean?
A few. With all due respect, I've also read PPRA, and I won't rehash up a history lesson, but thanks for that, Rachel. I understand that you tried to interpret the law. The reality is our job here is to adopt policies for RPS and to interpret them for our community. And how dare we ever consider people being concerned about a policy, whether in place or new, that a complaint. It's good that parents are engaged. It's good that we're asking questions about policies that may no longer be relevant, or that the environment around us has changed so dramatically in the last few years that anything related to public health should be a question that we should welcome from our parents and community. So I take very much exception to someone calling that a complaint. I'm glad we have parents that are looking at what we do. So with that, I'll say, first of all, thank you for those in the community that are paying attention to these policies. These are volunteer roles, and there are a lot of policies to go through, and no one parent and no one board member and no one volunteer could look at all of them from 2015 to today. With that being said, we have the responsibility to adopt policies for RPS. We can say, this is the federal guidelines. Here's how we interpret them. As a policy committee and a board, here is how we are going to act within our community to both address these and ensure that our community stakeholders are comfortable with that addressing, which is why what I asked at the very beginning was that we add explicit language here on top of the reference to PPRA about how RPS is going to act. The spirit of this policy doesn't matter. we're all questioning the spirit from 2015 when most of us, I don't think any of us, were even sitting in these seats. We shouldn't leave that for the next Board of Education when they pick this up 5 years from now and go, hey, the environment's changed. I wonder what these people meant. That is not good policy, especially one in a transient board that comes and goes. So my recommendation is we add some language that actually clarifies what we expect to do as RPS. Because we say we're never going to use this. We've never used it. So let's put that in there. Why not? The only way we're going to use this is with an explicit phone call with the guardian. And here's what PPRA says we have to do. Here's how RPS is going to behave, because that's what our policies drive. Otherwise, we shouldn't have any. So copying and pasting the language from the federal law or regulation doesn't change anything from the prior conversation, nor does simply referencing that, because our policies are for RPS. So I'd love for the policy committee to have worked so hard on language for Ridgefield, because that's who we represent. So with that, I'll just say, I still think this changed nothing from the prior versions. So I appreciate that you guys worked hard on it and did a ton of research on the back office of it, or on the back end of it. I've read all the PPRA stuff as well, but I can tell you none of this still says how RPS is going to interpret invasive non-emergency tests. If our intent is to never use them, we can say, we reflect that PPRA has some language around this. It is RPS's explicit intent to never do this. That is an okay thing to say. It still follows federal guidelines. If there's any risk, we say, we know this policy exists. And if the intent really is student privacy, we're even doubling down on that more. So I'd recommend we put language on here that says in the 7 years since 2015, when this policy was originally put in place, RPS has never used it and we intend never to. If we ever have to, it'll be a conversation with the superintendent and the guardian of the student involved.
I know, Jonathan, I'm not out of order, but can I address Liz's comment directly?
Sean, do you?
I don't want it to get lost in the questions.
Yep, go ahead.
So I absolutely agree with you, Liz, that environment changes year to year, let alone 7 years ago. So it's absolutely, otherwise, why are we even looking at policies approved in the year 2000? You know, this is why we do this, because everything needs a fresh set of eyes. We're bringing 9 new perspectives that weren't here prior. The public is bringing even more additional perspectives. So we absolutely need to address these. To your point, though, the second paragraph actually does explicitly say, should we decide to do this, we require the consent of the parent. So I think that piece of your concern is already addressed in the language that's there.
But we don't say how we're going to do it for non-emergency invasive. And that's the piece that I want additional clarification, so everyone in this community is explicit. That's all, Ken.
The how, what do you mean the how? And I'm asking this from just how.
The superintendent and will speak to the guardian directly. Because right now the language, if you read through that whole policy, provides for a softer recommendation that this can be done in the presence of a whole bunch of people. There's a list of people. Okay. But in this particular scenario, a non-invasive, non-emergency thing that we've never implemented should have a higher level degree of approval. That's what I'm asking for.
Okay. Thank you.
John, then Tina, then Selena.
All right, going on the Wayback Machine. Just to reiterate what Liz already said and what Ken just reiterated, nobody on this board voted for this policy in 2015. None of us were here. Just being very clear. Second, with respect to federal funding and loss of federal funding, I didn't hear this same concern when we were talking about resource officers and the law being passed to remove them from our district at the consideration of loss of federal funding. In fact, exactly the opposite. Now, whether or not we have this subsection in our policy, PPRA stays in place. It's still a thing. Doesn't matter if we reference it at all. It's still there. It's still federal law. We still have to subscribe to it, whether we talk about it or not. Just putting all that out there.
Thanks, Sean. Tina?
Okay, I'm just going to say, we're all sitting here and we're representing 4,000 plus students. Out of those 4,000, we've heard from families who have concerns about the language. We have to be responsible for that. Whatever happened in the past, it happened. We're not responsible. There's this language here. Obviously, it's raising concerns. Even 9 of us have concerns. I have gone through this. I respect all the work the policy committee did. Thank you, Rachel, for all the history. I also researched it. And yes, it's alarming to read. So when we sit here as Board of Ed members, our first job is about the kids. We doing right for all the kids. And that's where I'm going back to. So I think the board can discuss this, but we have the PRPA, the PPRA policy. But I do want to make sure that parents know somewhere we have language that parents have to opt in. Clarity is very important because I think we've said it, we're a transient board. Once we go, whoever comes in, any parent who's coming into the district, whether we leave this language, I understand, Rachel, where we're coming from, we can have the second part because when we talk about it and we're just saying that is the, the PPRA, but we also need to add that even to, something what Liz said, we can compromise on that and say, in the end, we still need a parent's approval. RPS is not doing anything till a parent is involved. And I can't answer, this is something we can discuss because I do understand the concerns. I do, but we also need to be responsible for all our kids. And again, I think as Susie said, we need to protect all our kids and just to make sure this never happens because, we can't really come up with anything. So I'm okay with the second, the second iteration, if you will, as long as we make it very clear that parents still have default is opt out. We need to. That's it. I think that
default is actually opt in, and it's not.
We make it opt out, right? That's the change we're doing.
No, we made the change that all parents must opt in. That was one of the first.
I have had the flu. I'm sorry. I've really.
It's okay. No. It's okay. That we made the change that parents must opt in.
Yes. So, but the default for them is right now they're not part of this unless they give explicit permission, right?
Correct.
And that's what I think we need to say because I go back to I've always said that, and I think we've heard it. Rachel told me this once too. When we sit here, we represent all parents, all the kids, and that includes the parents who are concerned about that and parents who are okay with that. And so we have to reach a compromise.
By way of the language of this, by way of the language, it indicates that basically the administration would be giving notice at the beginning of the year, direct notice to affected students, and then those parents of those students would then have to opt in. And again, it's to protect the students and the parents from anyone doing anything without giving them notice. And in this case, we made the language more stringent. To Liz's point, we made it for RPS that parents have to say yes before we would ever do that. And remember, faculty follows policy, right? Administration follows policy. In absence of that, I'm not comfortable in absence of that. I'm comfortable with knowing that our students and our families are protected, and anything like this, a parent would need to say it's okay.
Yes, that's exactly my point. Thank you.
Tina, you're seconding Rachel's recommendation for option 2.
Yes, because we have to protect I think, and the clearer we are, the more it makes sense.
I'm with you both on that. Selena and then Ken. And then Tom.
Just to clarify, I was not complaining about anyone who had an issue now with the policy. My comment was referencing the person who passed this in 2015, I think it was, who then jumped on the bandwagon and said this was a bad policy. And then we noted, oh, but you said yes to this policy. So there was some jumping on this and people complaining about this who voted yes for this originally. So I think there's some grandstanding about this policy when originally this wasn't an issue at all. So I'm not complaining about parents who might have an issue or are a little concerned about this, but people who originally voted for this and then decided to complain about this, that is a little odd. Like, why wasn't it an issue when you said yes to this, and then and then later now you're complaining about it on social media? That's weird. So I'm
not sure what we're talking about, but again, 7 years.
BOE members who voted for this originally should not be complaining about it now.
Okay, thanks. Ken, then Tom, and then Liz.
I think Tom had his hand up before mine. So
Tom, then Ken, and then Liz.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Ken. Just two comments. One, I just want to acknowledge Rachel and the incredible amount of work she's done and research she's done and leadership of our committee that she has partaken in educating all of us on this. She's really did an incredible job. So I want to acknowledge that. And I support her option too. And secondly, if we keep the big picture in mind, this policy is to comply with federal law that is designed to protect children and parents. That's the purpose of this, to protect children and parents. If we just strike it, for example, and leave it out completely, then some tribunal or some future decision maker could view the elimination of the policy altogether as somehow negatively impacted rights of children and parents. And we should be in the business of protecting children and parents. So I think Rachel's well-informed compromise and suggestion on option 2 would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Ken?
Liz, did you want to respond to? You're good. Okay. I just two things. Actually, I'm not going to say the first thing. I should have spoken before Tom because that was actually what I wanted to say was just to acknowledge Rachel's just the tremendous job that she's doing with her research, with bringing all of the information that the committee needs in order to be making informed decisions. Not necessarily ones the entire board likes, but at least they're a lot more informed thanks to her work. It is a thankless job, but I just wanted to make sure she knew that I was thanking her, I for one, and obviously Tom also. The other thing I was saying, because the biggest thing that bothers me about this whole piece is that we haven't been able to, what is it? What does it even mean? What is the definition? So something that just came to me, could this cover something like a potential strip search for, say, suspicion of drug possession? Or is that something separate?
No, and the reason we thought about that too, though, Ken, so good one. But the reason it wouldn't be is because if you notice, it indicates that we would have to give notice to families at the beginning of the year. So we wouldn't know who we were going to be strip searching. So it really doesn't. We thought about that, though.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I'm trying because nobody else seemed, I mean, not nobody else, but no federal.
So when one of those things comes up, if it does come up, bless you, Corey, is that families would need to know that we would need to let them know before we would ever do that. And that would have to be at the start of the year. And they would have to agree to let us do that. Right. That thing that no one knows what it is, but it protects the family should that thing ever arise.
I did have a third thing. I'm sorry, Jonathan. I know I said two. So as far as the question that's on the table, I support the second with the addition back of that. Here it'll be the first paragraph that's been stricken that says that the explicit opt-in. And I would also be comfortable adding additional language based on the concerns Liz expressed tonight of what does the opt-in, like who are the parties involved in that opt-in, specifically for subsection 7. So that's my piece on that.
Okay. Sean, you have your hand up and your hand up.
Last one. I agree with Liz and Jonathan and Ken that we need to add that language of who would enact this, the superintendent, and make it as narrow as possible, because we're never going to use it. Make it a high bar. It doesn't matter because we're never going to use it. We're all in agreement of that one. So it has to come from the superintendent to the parent and leave it at that. But I want that extra language added in.
So Rachel, it does seem like a slight modification to option 2 would pass with majority or perhaps unanimously here at the board.
Okay. Can I just ask a clarifying question to Sean's point?
Sure.
So where it says, so I think it's B, if the district elects to conduct any such, et cetera, et cetera. I think what you're asking for is instead of administration, Sean, you're saying the superintendent shall give direct notice.
I think that's what Liz was asking for, was yes. And make it as specific as possible. And if it has to be 2 people, make it 2 people. The superintendent and the assistant superintendent, or the superintendent and the health director, whatever it is. But it needs to be very, very specific. Because again, we're never going to use this. I think we're all
Okay, so just if we added that, and perhaps if we added instead of, I think it says, would be required to give consent, perhaps there we can say written consent, just to add a level of specificity.
Yes.
So it's not like.
I mean, it'd be easier if we take all this out and just leave it under the privacy policy and move on with our day, but nobody wants to do that. So yes.
Well, actually, option 2 does
striking all of this
under the privacy policy. It really does, but it refers back to the privacy. That, in fact, the second option, I think, is what we heard that the board wanted us to consider on February 14th. And that's why we came up with the second option, or the committee came up with the second option. So if we're not going to keep the option 2 with the red crossed out, that means that you're asking for option 1, which would change the language of administration.
I think we're asking for option 2 with very specifics on how we enact this.
Option 2 has all this removed, right?
Correct.
Just has the one.
But it would then add in how we enact it. It's the superintendent or the superintendent and one other designee in case the superintendent gets hit by a bus, in writing to the parent, the mechanics of it.
I think it's a relatively simple edit from my perspective, Dr. De Silva. Just basically that first paragraph that's below the addition in blue, page 5. Should the district require students, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the district shall first provide prior notice and obtain written consent of the parent. Or we don't have to say the district, we can say the superintendent, the health director, and the assistant superintendent of whatever shall provide notice to the parent and obtain written consent of the parent or students over the age of 18, and full stop. And that's all the addition. We don't need to add the bullets A, B, and all of that information.
To remove the definition of what we're talking about in the paragraph we're just adding back in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm not certain that makes it clearer to a parent that hasn't watched the last 3 board meetings. If we now have a paragraph that says, we won't do this, this, and this, and this for non-emergency invasive physical examinations, but then don't give them a listing of what that means, are we making it clearer for them?
My recommendation, Jonathan, would, in that case, if everyone is agreeing that with more stringent language, they would feel a little bit more comfortable, then my recommendation would go with option 1, change the language as Sean and Ken suggested, be very specific, add in written consent. And I think that we'd be moving in the right direction, because I agree with you. If option 2 with just that first paragraph, because later it talks about consent again, and we would be missing that piece. So I think if you're going to go with a shift in the language to be more specific, which is fine,
it's in option 1.
Then I would say option 1.
I'm confident that our policy committee can come back to the whole board with an option 1 revised to the point where we get unanimous approval at the board.
Okay, so you wanted to go back to committee then, Jonathan, to revise, or can we bring it forth for a second read with the revision since it's in front of the full board right now?
It can come to us as a second read. I can't guarantee that that will be the final read.
Okay.
Yes, it'll come back to us as a second read, as revised.
Okay. So it'll come back as a second read, as revised, as we spoke about tonight, as a full board.
Correct.
Okay.
And I appreciate the teamwork.
Thank you, everyone.
Rachel, is there any way you can just maybe find out the root of this policy? Is there anyone you could talk to that might like help us? Like, where did this come from? Like, when did this policy come into being? Like, I know you did a lot of homework for sure, but I mean, is there any person we could talk to that this policy was ever used? Do you think in Connecticut? I mean, between the two of us, we know a lot of people. Like, I don't know. Maybe we can talk about this separately, but because we're just going round and round, it's like there's got to be a reason that this is in here, a real like solid reason. I just, I'm just thinking.
I feel like Rachel brought us through the history of it, and
she did, but it's not satisfying.
The genesis of this, and I think we're leaving this conversation in a good spot to get everybody on the same page in the next meeting.
This doesn't seem like anybody. It seems like we're gonna come back to the same place, but okay. All right.
Anyone else on the policies?
I just want to say I really appreciate the robust discussion, and I thank everyone, and we will absolutely come back with a revision to option 1 for a second read next time. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you,
Rachel, for all the work. And now we can move on to items of information, starting with the enrollment report.
Okay, Dr. De Silva, do you mind if I start?
Yeah, I was waiting for you, Karen.
Okay,
we go through this every time.
I know, just want to make sure before I jump into a board meeting. Good evening. So you know that the second board meeting of each month, we present our enrollment changes. So that information is before you. So you can see that K-12, we have our normal changes of plus or minus 1, 2, 3 students at any given school. But I really want to make note that our largest change is at the preschool level, which supports the increase in special education needs. So our net total, when you look at all the changes between our K-12 schools, our pre-K, our outplacements, and our 18 to 21, is a net of 10 students. So you can see that's a pretty typical pattern that we've had over each month with a steady increase of enrollment. Are there any questions?
Just a comment that is now 98 students more than we had when we put together the budget book at the beginning of the budget season.
I don't have that. I have it from projections, but not from the budget. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you. Do you want to take us through the staffing report as well?
Yeah, basically, we give you, again, the second board meeting of each month, all the resignations, returns received, all the hiring we've done. So I just want to point out that as we approach April, that starts our real hiring season. So you will see more on that list as we go through the end of the school year. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Thank you. No questions. It looks like no questions tonight. Thank you. And now back to Rachel, the start of the night with correspondence report, starting with public comment and then the correspondence report.
Yes, so at this time, Jonathan, we have no attendees. Our correspondence report, we have received 13 emails since our last meeting. 1 email regarding subsection 7 of policy 5141.3. 1 email inquiring about the packet for the strategic planning committee meeting. 1 email providing feedback on retail of cannabis. 1 email providing positive feedback on February break. 1 email inquiring about the open choice program. 1 email supporting the Board of Education proposed budget. 1 email providing an introduction to a book. 3 emails sharing operational feedback, and 3 emails on a personnel matter. And that is it for this evening.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And that brings us to the bottom of the page here. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Sean, I saw you first. And do I have a second? Ken? All those in favor, please raise your hands.